2 hours ago, the White House crossed a line that has stunned economists, policy experts, and allied governments worldwide. President Trump signed Executive Directive 47B, imposing what officials are calling a procurement mandate on Canada. Every Canadian government agency, Crown Corporation, and federally funded institution must immediately transition to American-sourced goods across all categories. Not tariffs, not trade restrictions. A direct demand that Canada abandon supplier relationships built over decades and purchase exclusively from American manufacturers. The deadline is 90 days. The consequences for non-compliance include exclusion from cross-border trade programs, termination of financial clearing access, and freezing of Canadian sovereign assets held in U.S. institutions. The directive targets three critical sectors. First, all medical equipment and pharmaceutical procurement must shift to American suppliers. Canadian hospitals currently source ventilators, imaging systems, and surgical equipment from German, Japanese, and domestic manufacturers. Those contracts face immediate cancellation review. Second, all infrastructure and transit procurement must use American manufacturers. Canadian cities building subway systems, upgrading electrical grids, or purchasing public transit vehicles must now buy American or face federal funding cuts. Third, all defense and security procurement must receive individual White House certification before purchase. The certification process averages 120 days, which is longer than the compliance deadline itself. The White House framed this as partnership realignment. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called it necessary pressure to ensure supply chain security and reduce Canadian dependence on strategic competitors. The justification cited national security concerns and economic coordination. But the structure of the directive reveals something far more aggressive. This is economic subordination dressed in policy language. Washington expected the usual response: public outrage followed by private negotiations. Phone calls between Ottawa and Washington asking for flexibility. Maybe a face-saving compromise where Canada accepts the framework while securing exemptions for key sectors. That is how these confrontations have always resolved. Maximum pressure followed by managed retreat. Mark Carney did not follow the script. 65 minutes after the directive became public, Carney appeared at a podium in the House of Commons. No notes, no teleprompter. The chamber fell silent as he opened with a single sentence that would reverberate through financial markets within the hour. Canada will not comply with demands issued through economic coercion, and we have spent the last 14 months ensuring we do not need to. Then he announced 4 countermeasures, each one revealing preparation that began long before Trump picked up the pen. First, Canada is immediately activating emergency procurement protocols that redirect all federal contracts currently held by American firms to Canadian, European, or allied nation suppliers. The review covers $52 billion in annual contracts across defense, technology, healthcare, and infrastructure. If a non-American alternative exists, the American contract terminates within 30 days. Carney emphasized this is not permanent retaliation, but a response to being treated as an economic adversary. For as long as Canada faces coercive demands, Canada will purchase accordingly. Second, Canada is invoking reciprocal trade provisions under the USMCA that neutralize every tariff the United States has imposed on Canadian goods over the past 18 months. Legal experts had analyzed this clause for months. It allows Canada to suspend American tariff authority if Washington engages in trade measures that violate the agreement's spirit. The procurement mandate qualifies. Every American tariff on Canadian steel, aluminum, lumber, and dairy products is now legally nullified. Third, Canada is accelerating energy infrastructure that bypasses American markets entirely. The Trans Mountain Pipeline to Pacific ports receives emergency federal funding. Electrical grid connections to overseas buyers through subsea cables move from planning to construction. Natural gas liquefaction facilities on the West Coast fast-track to operational status. Canadian energy that currently flows south will begin flowing west and east within 9 months. Carney revealed that negotiations with Japan, South Korea, India, and Germany were finalized weeks ago. The buyers were waiting for Canada to activate the agreements. Fourth, Canada is opening formal consultations with the European Union and United Kingdom on creating a North Atlantic procurement framework independent of American systems. If Washington demands exclusive supplier relationships, Canada will build exclusive supplier relationships with allies who understand partnership rather than subordination. The framework would establish preferential trade status, shared certification standards, and coordinated responses to economic coercion from any source. Carney spoke for 11 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He did not attack Trump personally. He simply laid out dependencies that Washington had apparently forgotten existed. Canada supplies 60% of American uranium imports. American nuclear reactors depend on Canadian fuel for roughly 30% of their energy generation. Suspending uranium exports would create immediate energy security concerns across the American power grid. Canada supplies 3.8 million barrels of crude oil to American refineries daily. Gulf Coast refineries are physically engineered to process heavy Canadian crude. They cannot simply switch to Saudi or Venezuelan oil overnight. The refining infrastructure would require years and billions in reconfiguration. Canadian aluminum flows directly into American military aircraft production. Disrupting that supply chain affects F-35 manufacturing timelines, which impacts American defense commitments to NATO allies. Canadian electricity powers New England during winter peaks. Without Canadian hydroelectric imports, rolling blackouts become inevitable in Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine. Carney let each number settle before moving to the next. The message was unmistakable. This relationship is not one-sided. Coercion cuts both directions. But what truly stunned Washington was not the countermeasures themselves. It was the realization that Canada had been preparing for this exact scenario for over a year. The pipeline infrastructure was already under construction, the trade agreements were already negotiated, the legal frameworks were already drafted, the procurement alternatives were already identified. Carney did not improvise a response. He activated a plan that was ready long before the executive order arrived. A senior White House official told reporters on background that they expected resistance but not a fully loaded counter-strategy. The phrase used internally was, "We walked into an ambush we designed ourselves." The American business response was immediate and devastating to the administration's position. Within 3 hours, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce called the procurement mandate economically reckless and legally questionable. The National Association of Manufacturers warned that 1.8 million American jobs depend on integrated supply chains with Canada. The American Petroleum Institute stated bluntly that Canadian crude is irreplaceable for American refineries without multi-year infrastructure investments. Auto industry executives were even more direct. One CEO told financial media that every vehicle manufactured in North America crosses the border an average of 7 times during production. Disrupting that flow does not hurt Canada. It shuts down Detroit. These were not Canadian voices criticizing American policy. These were American institutions telling their own president that the directive threatens American economic interests more severely than Canadian ones. The international reaction compounded Washington's isolation. The European Union issued a statement supporting Canada's right to resist economic coercion and expressing concern about weaponizing trade relationships between allied democracies. The United Kingdom Foreign Secretary said London stands with Ottawa in defending rules-based international commerce. Japan and Australia released carefully worded statements that clearly endorsed Canada's position without directly criticizing the United States. Even Mexico, which typically avoids confrontation with Washington, expressed concern about unilateral actions that destabilize continental trade. Canada was not isolated. The United States was. Now Trump faces 3 options, and none deliver what he wanted. He can enforce the directive and watch American energy costs spike, manufacturing supply chains collapse, and defense production timelines extend. He can quietly rescind the order and absorb the political humiliation of backing down after Carney's very public counterstrike. Or he can escalate further against a NATO ally whose economy is deeply intertwined with American interests and whose government just demonstrated it will not fold under pressure. Every option damages Trump more than it damages Carney. And Carney made sure Washington understood that before negotiations even begin. 2 hours ago, the White House thought it was delivering maximum economic leverage. 2 hours later, Washington is realizing it may have just created the most formidable opponent it has faced in decades. And the man standing across the table is not reacting to American moves. He is 3 moves ahead and has been for over a year.